into preaching is not in vain. Somebody is listening and going home and going to work and going in the marketplace telling somebody, let me tell you what my pastor said Sunday morning. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring back beauty to a world uproar, if I can spread love's message like my master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. You became followers of us and of the Lord because you received the word with much affliction. I'm careful in preaching on Sunday morning. And I shared this with another pastor friend of mine. I ask the Lord all the time, forgive me for the silly things that I have said, for the foolish comments that I have made on Sunday morning when I should have been preaching. I wish I could go and wake up some of them old people in the grave and apologize to them for some of the silly things I said, being young and ignorant as a pastor, thinking that I knew a whole lot when I had just been preaching a few years. I started preaching at 18 and pastoring at 20 years old. That's too ignorant to be pastoring a church. That's too young and foolish to be pastoring a church. But God knew what he was doing. God knew not to call me to Lily Grove at 20 years old, because I would not have been able to handle anything this big at 20 years old. God had to get some of that ignorance out of me. I still got a little bit of it in me. I'm still kind of silly sometimes and say some crazy stuff, but God had to get a whole lot of that immaturity out of me before I came to this big church, because you can take a little man and put him in a big church and he won't stop till he brings it down to his side. Somebody gonna help me preach it. So God had to take that nonsense out of me and that craziness out of me so that when I came to this church, I'd be able to pastor this church with some power and conviction, but God had to mature me. And I want to say to some aspiring preacher or pastor in here right now, don't try to get too much too soon, because it'll mess you up in the long run. But I ask the Lord every day to forgive me for the silly, foolish things I've said on Sunday morning, because people come here in much affliction. Some people are in here right now, don't know how tomorrow is going to turn out. You're worried about your bills. You're worried about your son. You're worried about your house. You're worried about your health. And when you come in here on Sunday morning, you want to look in the pulpit and see somebody who's been struggling with the text, somebody who's been wrestling with the word and asking God what it is that you want me to say to your people on Sunday morning. And then when you leave here on Sunday morning, you might still have the same problems you had before you came in, but you have a better spirit about it. You have a better outlook. You have a better attitude, because the preacher has spoken a word of assurance in your affliction. Some of you have said to me that my best preaching has been at funerals. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. I'm going to take it in the spirit that you gave it to me. But persons have mentioned to me that you have done your best preaching in these 18 years at funerals, because you have learned and mastered somehow the art of texting the funeral to the person's life, so that people will go out from here uplifted And people have joined this church from sermons at funerals because you have learned how to counsel and encourage. And that has not always been. God has had to bring me to that. And I've had to admit some faults and some failures in my own preaching and in my own life. But it is not until the preacher gets honest about his preaching that he can really touch people in their afflictions. Some of you have buried mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, and then come here on Sunday morning looking for a word of counsel, a word of encouragement, a word of consolation from the Lord, and hopefully you have found it in my preaching. I have not always been the best, but I've always tried to do my best, because I bathe my preaching every time I stand in the power of the Holy Ghost. Because if preaching doesn't do anything, it ought to change somebody's life. You're going to help me close this little sermon, won't you? I'm trying not to sweat up my little new suit. And you know, I want to be fresh and crisp when I walk down the aisle at 11 o'clock. But I can't think of any better way to celebrate my anniversary than to do what it is that you are celebrating me doing. Standing in this pulpit on Sunday morning, as I've done for the last 18 years, and start telling you the story like I've been telling you for 18 years. You know it, you've heard it so many times, but I think I ought to repeat it on this 18th anniversary. I've been telling you for 18 years, since I came here in 1990, I've been telling you the story. You know it by heart, but I think I'm gonna go on and rehearse it for somebody who might be in here for the first time. And then I want to say it because I've been saying it so long. He's Adam's redeemer. He's Abel's vindicator. He's Abraham's sacrifice. He's Noah's ark. He's Moses' bush on fire. He's Joshua's battle axe. He's Gideon's fleece. He's Samson's power. He's David's music. He's Solomon's wisdom. Y'all know him, don't you? He's Jeremiah's balm in Gilead. He's a wheel in the middle of a wheel. Is there anybody here who knows who I'm talking about? He's God's only son. He's Mary's baby boy. He's James and Jude's big brother. He's Matthew's king, Mark's suffering servant, Luke's great physician, John's word made flesh, Acts coming of the Holy Ghost, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth, the blessed and the only potentate, the faithful and the true witness. Y'all know him, don't you? He's a rock in a weary land. He's a shelter in a time of storm. He's a friend when you're friendless. He's bread when you're hungry. He's water when you're thirsty. I told you preaching has got to be bathed in the Holy Ghost. I feel the Holy Ghost in this place right now. Is there anybody here? Know you've been elected. Know you've been saved. Know you're a child of God. If the Lord been good to you, if the Lord opened doors for you, if the Lord saved your soul, if the Lord put food on your table, clothes on your back, money in your pocket, why don't you grab somebody? Why don't you hug somebody? Tell them the Lord has been good to me. Hey, the Lord has, you know what I'm about to say. The Lord has opened doors for me. You know where I'm going with this. The Lord has made my enemies leave me alone. You know where I'm headed with this. The Lord has smiled on me. You know where I'm trying to go with this. The Lord has picked me up, turned me around, placed my feet on solid ground. Do me like Jesus. Have you tried it? Say yeah. Yeah. Shake somebody's hand. Tell them I know him for myself. I know him. I know him. I know him. He's been good. He's been good. He's been kind. He brought me from a mighty long way. Have you tried him for yourself? Has he opened doors that were closed in your face? Has he put food on your table? Come on, help me thank him. Help me lift him up. Help me magnify his name. He's worthy. He's worthy.